up, guys? So, interesting thought for the day. You're watching the UFC or the latest prize fight or whatever, K1 maybe. You're going to notice something. You tend to see a lot of guys stand with not only one foot forward but one shoulder forward, and their guard is anywhere from out here to right here. Well, interestingly enough, that's horrible. The reason why such stances were invented were for point sparring and sparring with specific or limited targeting areas, zones of contact for points or for just safety. Problem with a stance like this is now I'm putting my back that much closer to you, and truly in a really no holds barred, no targets barred fight, and now exposing my least defensible area, my back. And it's much easier to flank somebody when they're shoulder forward. Now, for a fighting stance, you have to have one foot forward. Fighting squarely pretty much only works when your back is up against a wall. There's not much reason to stay square. It may happen in transition, it may happen for a single move. There are times when you have to be square, but not in general. That's not how you get ready for motion, generally speaking. Generally speaking, when you know a fight's coming, you are in a 1 foot forward stance. This is a walking and running preparation stance. This is literally your fight or flight stance. There's a reason we adapted it. Thing is, we are forward moving creatures. We are adapted for forward motion, which means that if I turn slightly sideways, I am now no longer positioned for forward motion. I'm positioned with my attention diagonally out, or even worse, sideways out. I mean, how many times have you seen Van Damme stand here, sideways? It's great for tournament karate, terrible for a real fight. So here's the idea. When you're in your fighting stance, I want you to shift your hips forward. Now, what you do with your hands is up to you. There's a couple of options, and I want to talk to you about that. But I want you to keep the idea of keep your feet at a natural width apart. You don't have to go into these crazy sumo stances or anything. But I want you to think of toes, knees, and hips forward, shoulders forward. Now, you can have one hand in front of the other. I like to cover my center line with one hand in front of the other. But you don't have to be here. Remember the Transporter with Jason Statham, right? He was here. Let's see if I can get in frame. But anyway, he was here with the hand extended out. It's very common. Play with the jab, keep people at distance, playing with distance, that's fine. We did that a lot in Savate. Is it the best strategy? Yeah, it's good for sport. That's about it. Are there times where you want your hands further away from your center? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no one size fits all. Circumstance always dictates. So are there going to be times where you're closer in yet, or further out? Yes. Are there going to be times when you're closer in? Yes. Now, where do the hands fall? In Wing Chun, we're here. We fall in around heart level. In Sistema, they don't really put up a guard. They keep their hands floating, relaxed, natural. Keeps your opponent guessing. But it also makes defending high harder. Of course, they use a lot more body motion stuff. They have other ways to compensate for it. If you go with a more traditional thing, you tend to be chin level or higher between chin and forehead. If you're fighting up here, that's fine. You're curling in a lot. It's a little more boxing, a little more kickboxing. I hate the Muay Thai stance. The openness of it, I think, is just terrible. If you happen to have good timing and all that, it's not the best stance to be defensive against somebody with excellent timing. That's the other problem. Most of these specialty stances are designed around the same system. People who are fighting for sport within the same system, within the same rules, or a grouping of systems that have similar concepts and ideas and rules and whatnot. And that's fine, just understand what it is. So let's bring everything to relatively forward. Am I saying it has to be exactly perpendicular, square? Yeah, not really, but you want to make sure that your weapons are available in pretty much every direction and a square stance. Even with 1 foot forward, squared hips and shoulders, which is the most important part, keeps your weapons at maximal or optimal range. Maximal range, of course, you have to blade to get more range. That's why a sidekick is so great. It has amazing range on it. Unfortunately, you're also massively exposing your back. Not because the sidekick turns your back, but because by virtue of blading your body, you are now putting your back a quarter turn closer to your opponent. It's terrible. So just start thinking about that in terms of being forward, or mostly forward, like no more than an 80-20 difference. Simply because you want to have that weapon availability and that movement availability. One last thing is how you hold your hands. Like I said, heart level to head level, that's fine how you want to do it. I use them variably, interchangeably, but I want you to think in terms of, you can do one of two things. You can have one hand forward, or you can have both hands relatively even. Unless, of course, you're going for a more, tricky Systema thing, or, some avant-garde style where you're doing weird, wacky things. But let's assume you have your hands up. You basically got one hand forward, or both hands relatively even. When I first got into MMA, it was C-curve in the spine, knuckles by the eyebrows, and elbows guarding the midsection, and that way you've got full coverage. Problem is, it's not very comfortable to stay crunched up like that. It's a great defensive stance, it's just not very comfortable. It kind of pre-turtles you, and the cool thing is it pulls your guts away from the fight and puts your weapons forward. It's actually a pretty good stance, it's energy costly. It's more comfortable out here, Savate style, doing Savate for so many years. This is pretty comfortable, floating around the jaw and probing. But the 3/4 bladedness I don't like so much. Wing Chun, we're here. This is good. I like the Wing Chun thing. I tend to not go strict Wing Chun. I tend to float more with my hands in a more neutral position, but I tend to stay on my center line. I find for me that works best. But now I want to show you one more thing. This is something my Kung Fu brother Nick and I had been talking about. He had been playing with it for a while, and we started playing with it in some of our training and sparring, and we find it works very well to prevent us, because even with 1 foot forward, if you put the same side hand forward, you tend to start blading as you're moving, because it's easy, because it's simple, and because everybody trains that way, so there's so much nervous recognition of it. So what we're doing is, instead of the same, I know you can't see my legs, but if my left leg is forward, my left hand is forward normally, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to switch it. This helps me keep my shoulders square, and as I move, it keeps me square on it, so it keeps my weapons forward. In boxing you have orthodox and southpaw. So here you've got southorthodox and orthopaw. It's just a joke, you can call it what you want, but for the time being we're calling it southorthodox. You can also call it a mixed lead, depending on how you're defining it. You can say left mixed lead going by the foot, or right mixed lead going by the hand. You can call it whatever you want, there's no standard. Just start thinking in terms of what you're doing, anatomically, structurally. Don't worry so much about what the terminology is. Terminology is not that important except when teaching. So mix up your lead a little bit. and you're going to find that your jabs are sneakier because they're hidden. You're going to find that your crosses look a little strange to people. You're going to find that you stay more square and ready for your opponent. It is a fantastic lead. And honestly, I don't stay here the whole time. I switch, I drop my hands, I come in. I use everything that I've been taught because the circumstance dictates. But it's just an idea on your ready stance, your fighting stance, and kind of playing with some of these ideas. So just remember, all your major joints forward, and either one hand leads or both hands are even, and just play with it for a little while with a mixed lead. Play with it, South of Dock style. All right, talk to you guys later. Good journey.